Alexa, play Send Me Radio.
Welcome to Send Me Radio.
Hello, and welcome to Send Me Radio. Today we will be exploring the topic, Is anything too hard for God? The story of Abraham and Sarah is one of faith, doubt, and the miraculous power of God. Abraham, originally named Abram, was promised by God that he would become the father of many nations. However, there was one significant problem. His wife, Sarah, originally Sarai, was barren, and they were both far beyond childbearing years. Despite this, God reaffirmed his promise, stating that Sarah would bear a son. Sarah's laughter, a moment of doubt in Genesis 18, 3 visitors, who were actually divine messengers, came to Abraham's tent. One of them told Abraham that Sarah would have a son by the same time next year. Sarah, who was eavesdropping from inside the tent, laughed to herself and thought, "After I am worn out and my Lord is old, will I now have this pleasure?" Genesis 18 verse 12. Her laughter was not one of joy but of disbelief. She was in her 90s, and Abraham was nearly 100 years old. From a human perspective, having a child at such an age was impossible. However, the Lord responded, "Is anything too hard for the Lord?" Genesis 18 verse 14. This question was not just for Sarah, it was a declaration that God's power is limitless. Despite her initial doubt, Sarah later gave birth to Isaac, whose name means laughter. What once seemed impossible became a testimony to God's power. Other examples of God's power in impossible situations. The Bible is filled with accounts of God demonstrating that nothing is too hard for him. Here are a few. 1. Paul and Silas in prison. Acts 16 verses 25 to 26. Paul and Silas were imprisoned for preaching the gospel in Philippi. At midnight, instead of lamenting their situation, they prayed and sang praises to God. Suddenly, an earthquake shook the prison, opening all the doors and loosening their chains. This miraculous event led to the conversion of the jailer and his entire household. God demonstrated that even prison walls could not contain his power. 2. The Israelites crossing the Red Sea. Exodus 14. When the Israelites were fleeing Egypt, they found themselves trapped between the Red Sea and Pharaoh's approaching army. From a human perspective, escape was impossible. However, God told Moses to stretch out his staff, and he parted the sea, allowing the Israelites to cross on dry ground. When the Egyptian army pursued them, the waters returned and drowned them. God made a way where there was no way. 3. Daniel in the lion's den. Daniel 6. Daniel was thrown into a den of hungry lions for praying to God instead of obeying King Darius's decree. However, God shut the mouths of the lions, and Daniel remained unharmed. The next morning, the king, who had grown fond of Daniel, was overjoyed to see him alive. God proved that his power was greater than any earthly decree. 4. The feeding of the 5,000. Matthew 14 verses 13 to 21. When a large crowd followed Jesus, the disciples worried because they only had 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. It seemed impossible to feed so many people. Yet, Jesus blessed the food, and it miraculously multiplied, feeding over 5,000 men, not counting women and children. There were even 12 baskets of leftovers. 5. The resurrection of Lazarus. John 11. Lazarus had been dead for 4 days when Jesus arrived. His sisters, Mary and Martha, believed that if Jesus had come earlier, he could have healed him. But Jesus declared, "I am the resurrection and the life." He called Lazarus out of the tomb, and the dead man walked out, alive and well. This miracle showed that even death is not too hard for God. The message, trust in God's power. The question, is anything too hard for the Lord, is a challenge for us today. Just as God fulfilled his promise to Abraham and Sarah, delivered Paul and Silas, made a way for the Israelites, and performed countless miracles, he is still able to do the impossible in our lives. When we face situations that seem hopeless, whether financial struggles, health issues, family problems, or spiritual battles, we must remember that God is in control. He specializes in making the impossible possible. No prison is too strong, no sea is too wide, no lion is too dangerous, no hunger is too great, and no grave is too deep for God to intervene. If you are in a difficult situation, trust that the same God who fulfilled his promises to Abraham and Sarah is still working miracles today. Is anything too hard for the Lord? The answer is a resounding no. Thank you for listening to Send Me Radio. Visit us at www.sendmeradio.net for more awesome Christian content.